Some background information came out today regarding the Kirk Cousins, Michael Penix situation. This particular report we're going to go over discussing how Arthur Smith, after he was fired and this team went searching for their head coach, and they came across a little situation that had brewed up some memories of the past in terms of how this situation should have been handled and what previous candidates had suggested should go down, how it should be handled. And this is how we came to the situation where this team drafted Michael Penix Jr. at number 8 because of a previous game plan that was not able to be implemented because this team hired Arthur Smith instead of another head coach. So we're going to talk about that in a moment, that this has been kind of in the making. This has been a plan of attack. And as much as people want to complain about it, gripe and moan about it, say it was a bad pick, say it was a wasted pick, say they shouldn't have paid Kirk Cousins, say they should have did this or should have done that. At the end of the day, more that comes out on this, the more I like it. The more I sleep on it, the more I like it. The more I talk about it, the more I like it. And the more people get upset about it, the more I like it. And more importantly than anything, this is the Fantasy Football Show. More importantly than anything, this helps Bijan, this helps Kyle Pitts, this helps Drake London. It helps any owners, prospective owners of said players to sleep like a baby at night because this team is secure at the QB position. But this new staff had a plan to have succession in place so they never have to search for a quarterback again, at least for the next 10, 15 years. And people can crap on it all they want. People could say they could have allocated their resources differently. We'll find out how smart this move was. And even people, after they see, if they see, hopefully, we wish good health for Kirk Cousins, but if Penix Jr. gets out there and becomes the player I think he can be, and I think he's probably the better option at the end of the day long term, maybe not out of the gate, but long term, maybe even by week 8, week 10, week 12, maybe by week 1 of 2025, even if that ends up unfolding in a way that makes this decision look great to draft Penix Jr. at 8, people will still gripe and complain and moan about the contract that Kirk Cousins got. I'm here to tell you, none of that should matter to you as a fantasy football entrepreneur. None of that should mean anything but positivity for you fantasy football prospective owners. The Fantasy Football Show begins right now, delving into a little bit of this detail. Let's go.
Live from the FantasyFootballShow.com studios. It's the Fantasy Football Show. Live! Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern. Smitty is also live whenever news breaks.
From the FantasyFootballShow.com news desk, here is your breaking news.
So this report came out talking about how Raheem Morris was actually in contention for the job coming off the Matt Ryan era, essentially. Arthur Smith was being interviewed for this head coaching job. And when Raheem Morris was asked about what he would do with this team, he told Arthur Blank and the brass, I would make sure I have not only a QB, but QB succession in place. I would want to have a succession process in place immediately so that when we need to go searching for a quarterback, we're not scrambling and doing what ended up happening, the Ritter situation. So this little report here was really interesting. And some people say it doesn't change their mind. It still makes it a bad pick, whatever. But this is not like some sort of like flying by the seat of your pants type decision where they went out and got Penix Jr. and they didn't know what they're doing. They panicked, they drafted him, or they had some buyer's regret on Kirk Cousins. They didn't. This report actually maps out how Raheem Morris, back when Arthur Smith was hired, told Arthur Blank, have a succession plan. Having a backup quarterback that you feel could be your starter in your future behind your currently good quarterback is his game plan, his mission, what he would bring to the table. Arthur Smith walked in and said, I've worked with Tannehill. I know what I'm doing with quarterbacks. We'll figure it out. And so the Falcons went ahead and liked what they heard from that, according to this report. Well, it ended up being that Raheem Morris was more right, obviously, than Arthur Smith. And so the background of this report today just sheds light on the fact that this has been in the game plan for Raheem Morris the entire time. And I like this move, even from just a football perspective. It doesn't compute for everybody. It's definitely unorthodox. But for anybody that thinks that I'm just saying this because I'm a Falcons believer right now or something, I hit the wrong button here. Anybody that thinks I'm just kind of doubling down because we have Atlanta Falcon, support on this channel, that's not the case. Because when the Jets were on the clock in this 2024 NFL draft, your boy thought it would be important for the New York Football Jets to grab a quarterback. It was a vital move, in my opinion, for this team to grab a quarterback. They ended up grabbing Jordan Travis, which is fantastic. This kid's got a lot of upside. I like that they grabbed a quarterback to back up Aaron Rodgers, one that maybe could be the future in New York. But I said this time and time again that the New York Jets, and we didn't touch on the Falcons as much, but we mentioned it in passing, that the Falcons are a team that needs some sort of support, some sort of game plan, backup plan. Who's the quarterback if Kirk Cousins goes down, who's recovering from a torn Achilles? And the same thing, especially the case in New York, given that we saw what happened and how this New York Jet team crumbled without any sort of quarterback leadership. This was my favorite landing spot, the New York Jets. This pick right here was my favorite landing spot for the New York Jets in the 2024 draft for Michael Penix Jr. And it doesn't change over in Atlanta. This was a high draft pick. I know 8 is higher than where the Jets were selecting. I get that, but it's not that big of a difference. And at the end of the day, if I'm pumping up the Jets taking Michael Penix Jr. and being unorthodox, you know damn well I don't think the Falcons doing it at 8 is crazy either. One could argue, it's a very solid argument, that allocating resources on a $100 million quarterback to just say, hey, we love Michael Penix so much that we want to make sure we get him at 8. You could just say, why not just roll with him at 8? Why plan for the worst? Why plan for a disaster? Why not just grab him and put him? Well, because he comes with a combination of brilliance that I think will translate at the NFL level. He's the most NFL-ready quarterback of the entire lot of the quarterbacks. He does come with some injury risk that he's shaken off. I get that too. But this is a team that said we want to dominate in our quarterback room. We are willing, very openly willing to sacrifice other positions of need potentially and coach those up, fill them, but coach them up to have the best quarterback room, the most secure quarterback room in the NFL. And when you have weapons like Bijan, Drake London, and a neglected Kyle Pitts that is teeter-tottering in a very dangerous territory of never developing properly and having a stunted growth forever, you have to make sure you are not sitting there. Michael Penix Jr. goes out, gets injured, and you don't have a backup plan. Now, it just so happens the backup plan is the reverse. Cousins is going to go out. He's got the Achilles tear. He's going to go out, and if he gets hurt, Penix comes in. But either way, they're covered, and they can potentially do everything they want to do with Penix under center, and they can do everything they want to do with Kirk Cousins under center. And not a lot of teams, if any, can really say that, because this team has 2 top 12 caliber quarterbacks on the same roster. Allocation of resources, muff, whatever you want to call it. I call it kind of quiet genius. I call it a plan of attack that I would deploy. And it's not me saying this after the fact. I just told you and proved it with my New York Jet plan of attack, which was very similar. Achilles tear to Aaron Rodgers, same concept. Even as important, I wouldn't say more important, because Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, Sauce Gardner, the defense, the boys. This is a really amazing team that can't go with a headless quarterback position. Again, we saw it absolutely just drain the hell out of all these players. The defense played bad at times because it was always on the field and they couldn't move the football. And Breece Hall did his best, became running back 2 in a very bad situation. Imagine what Breece Hall is going to do with good quarterback play, secure quarterback play. Now, I like Penix Jr. in New York. I like Penix Jr. in Atlanta. And when the word came out that Penix Jr. was being looked at by Atlanta days before the NFL draft, people scratched their head. They said, what is this? Is this smoke? They can't possibly want to do this, right? And teams met with team players all the time that weren't really in their bucket list for that specific draft slot, but so you kind of brushed it off, okay? They met with the Falcons met with Penix Jr. They can't possibly be thinking this, right? No, we talked about it. We kicked it around. It made sense to me. It made sense to anybody that I think thinks outside the box and doesn't have to just be cookie cutter with this situation. Build your team however you want to build your team. Build your team how you believe it to be successful and safeguarded. And Raheem Morris told the Atlanta Falcons in the interview process when Arthur Smith was hired, I would do it this way. What we just saw. I would double down on quarterback so you never have to worry about the most important position in football. Without a quarterback, you can't do anything. And what happens? Arthur Smith ends up screwing the whole thing up. And what does Raheem Morris say? How does Raheem Morris even get the job? He walks in and says, I told you that this was going to happen. And this is why I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And so Raheem Morris comes back around and does exactly this time around what he said he was going to do last time and proves his worth in Atlanta. Now, everyone can point fingers and laugh all they want. I believe in time this story will be an amazing one in reflection. Even if those people that don't want to let go of the fact that they spent all that money on Cousins for nothing because look how good Penix Jr. is, they won't give Raheem Morris the respect he deserves. I will. I'll be here to answer the call. I'll be here to ring the bell. Raheem Morris and Zach Robinson, in my opinion, is still going to be one of the best coaching duos in football in 2024, potentially coach of the year, absolute turnaround of the year. This is a magnificent situation. We've got a lot of these defensive-minded coaches with an offensive-minded QB coordinator or of such becoming the offensive coordinator, or a Kingsbury who's been a head coach, much better offensive coordinator. He comes into Washington, and then you got Dan Quinn heading up defensive-minded. But Raheem Morris is brilliant. Raheem Morris is so much smarter than people give him credit. And the people running their mouth about Raheem Morris right now, and all these little tweeter conversations, these Twitter warriors that know nothing about him. They don't know that the entire Rams organization from top to bottom went to the Atlanta Falcons and said, look, we don't want to tell you this, but this is the guy. This guy's ready. He's been ready. He needs this job because he's going to crush it. And we don't even want to tell you this, to be honest with you. From players on down, all the big names talking about this guy, endorsing this guy. So Robinson and Morris are going to explode this situation out of the water. And everybody that's doubting it's going to be very, very, very embarrassed later when it all pencils out. That's what I have to say about this. And I also, this is not a knock on Kirk Cousins. This is not a, hey, Kirk Cousins is going to get replaced by Penix Jr. because he's not a great quarterback. This is to do a lot of different things. Kirk Cousins coming off an Achilles tear. Aaron Rodgers coming off an Achilles tear. Ziggy, how old is Kirk Cousins? Ziggy, how old is Kirk Cousins?
Kirk Cousins is 35 years old and was born on August 19th.
Ziggy off. Turns 36 in August before the season begins. Not saying he can't do it. Not saying he won't do it. I'm merely telling you that coming off an Achilles tear at the age of 36 when your body doesn't respond like it used to, there are very strong ideas running around my head that predict, I can see it now, I can envision is probably the best word, calf strains, quad strains, different compensation injury strains. And if this guy's banged up at all during the preseason, during the offseason, guess who's stepping in to take work? Guess who's stepping in to kind of, unfortunately, and this is probably the negative, create controversy? Michael Penix Jr. And it'll be interesting. I will say that the team is going to muff this thing and screw it up if they try to shelve Penix Jr. Not activate him. Keep him away from the starting lineup to try and avoid controversy. That will, in some sense, keep Kirk Cousins from looking over his shoulder, but it also will not set up Penix Jr. properly. And it won't it won't create the kind of security that you ended up trying to create and build and nurture by having that backup ready to go. So I hope to God we don't see that happen. If we do, I'll be very pissed off if that's the way they approach it. And I'll tell you, straight out of the gate, I'll tell you, this is not the right move to not have Penix Jr. in there. Now, week 1, we'll see. But I think there, as I said, I can envision there being some calf injuries and strains. And the calf injuries and the calf strains are the most leading indicating injuries to a potential Achilles problem, whether it's an Achilles strain, soreness, and eventual tear. So if Cousins has any sort of calf strain at 36 years old, even if it's not necessarily even related to the Achilles, because you can't always tell, and even imaging won't necessarily tell you the whole story, they're shutting him down until they 100% feel like he's not going to tear an Achilles. And then Penix Jr. comes in. Once Penix Jr. goes in and he looks electric, it's then Cousins needs another week. Cousins needs another week. He's electric 2 or 3 weeks in a row. Cousins needs a little more time just to be cautious until the point of no return. And then they can come out and say, Penix is our guy moving forward, because we've had 5 straight games of 4 wins out of 5 games. Amazing production, team leadership. The team is behind him. The players love him. Then all of a sudden you have this strange situation where your backup quarterback, yes, is embarrassingly getting $100 million. And it is something that people will bring up from time to time. But at the end of the day, if this team is winning and they have great success on the back of their quarterback play, then they're going to be remembered a very different way, I think, when all is said and done. And at least people like me, storytellers like me, will tell a positive story about it from here on out. And you can be rest assured that I'm going to continue that chant. Bijan to the moon. Bijan to the moon. Bijan couldn't be safer or more secure than this situation.
Hi, my name is Bijan Robinson. I like long walks on the beach. And, well, I also like scoring.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special message from the Bruce's mother.
Get Bijan.
Dial in. Phone lines are open.
Call into the show. Call into the show.
Brought to you by The Attic, formerly known as Grindhouse. Dial in. Your boy's here to answer the call. Anybody has a Penix Jr. conversation, Kirk Cousins topic, Bijan Robinson prediction. Bijan Robinson, just, you want to call in and just say his name. Say his name. You're damn right. Or you want to call in and talk about how Drake London is worthy of his crazy high ADP right now. God, Drake London's going in insane territories. He's going at like 12, 13 turn now, which I'm not saying he can't earn that, but good Lord, that is a high piece of draft capital, almost maxing out his ceiling. And again, he could earn it and get you exactly what you pay for, but it's kind of a tough thing. Bijan to the mother freaking moon. What's Bijan going to do this year? What's his stat line going to look like? Your boy Smitty's got some predictions, and I've talked about this several times. I think I have the Bijan board right here. And he was running back 9 last year on 2023 stats that included 1463 total, which is quite impressive when you think about him getting third running back type work at the goal line. He was like the third option on the depth chart for RB usage at the goal line, behind Cordero Patterson and who Arthur Smith called the best goal line back in the league, Tyler Algier. You could have fooled me. 1463 and 8 touchdowns and 58 receptions is actually remarkable. It's running back 9. He missed, really at the end of the day, you could say like handfuls of games when you attribute his migraine game, non-usage, etc. And honestly, I think like an 1,800 total yard season, 12 touchdown total yard season, and 70 receptions would be his floor. Like, that's disappointing. 75 receptions, I'm even calculating that low. I probably need to up this to like 80, to be honest. I'm going to move this to 80 receptions right now. We'll move it to 80 receptions. We'll call it 5 to 6 receiving touchdowns, 12 rushing touchdowns. I mean, you could even say 11 to 12. 5.2 carries, very minimal. That's for this guy. This guy could be a 5.5 yard per carry guy. 80 receptions, 650, 5 to 6 scores. We're talking about a player that could easily be 17, 18, 19, 20 touchdowns on the year. That's why we created that animation that all he does is score touchdowns, because I've been feeling this way about him since he was drafted. You know, before he was drafted, months, a year before he was drafted. Bijan Robinson's an absolute monster in the making. And yeah, we might be a year early on this guy. Yeah, we might have drafted him too high last year. That's on me. I'll take a lap on that. I've taken a lap over and over, and I'll admit that I was the leader. If I'm going to tout this guy as if I'm going to say this is the guy I'm higher on than anybody, nobody's higher on Bijan than me, then I have to take my lumps too. I can't come into the 2023 season and say no one likes Bijan more than me, and then yet come out of 2023 and not say I need to take my lumps and take a lap for having Bijan projected to do what I believe he does this year, last year. That's on me. There's good and bad in the prediction game. Sometimes you're a year early, but this man could easily be running back 1 overall in fantasy football scoring in 2024, and he could be widely accepted as the best running back in the National Football League after 2024's conclusion from a football perspective. Like, hey, ask coaches, who's the best running back in the league? Bijan. Fantasy-wise, who's the best running back in the league? Ask fantasy guys, Bijan. We could easily be looking at that this year. Gibbs is in the mix. Breece Hall's in the mix. Christian McCaffrey could have the 1 year left. Very, very, very scary, though, at 28 years of age in a Shanahan offense where running backs get hurt over and over, where overworking happens over and over and over. CMC's very, very touch and go this year for me in terms of the 1 overall. The 2, 3, 4, the further you get into the top 5, the easier it is to take a gamble, you could say, if it's even a gamble on CMC. The one thing I'll continue to say on CMC, and I'll say it until the end of the year. So there's no, oh, Smitty, you were wrong on CMC. I'm not really wrong on CMC. I'm objective about CMC. I'm careful about CMC. And my stance is this, and it will remain this way. I'd rather trade him midseason than avoid him, right? I'd also say that he's as risky to doubt as he is to draft. And that is something that you can say about any player once they get into their career far enough where they're in their prime, but they're teeter-tottering on when is their last year and drop off. So you have to say to yourself, is this a player that has 1 more year? You don't know the answer to that. If you say you do, he'll be fine, he's going to be amazing, then you have goggles on that are this thick, because he's 28 years old and he has a workload and tread ripped off the tires more than any running back in the National Football League. And he plays for an aggressive scheme where running backs get hurt because it's the most aggressive and crazy scheme in the National Football League. Very productive, but very aggressive, very hard on people. Injuries are through the roof every year for a reason. It's not just a coincidence. But CMC is a very, very, very tough player to draft in multiple leagues at the 1.1. He's very easy to draft at the 1.1 in one league, and that's my going recommendation. Hey, Smitty, what do I do with CMC? Draft him in one league. You can't not. If you have an opportunity at 1 to take CMC in a redraft league, of course not Dynasty, then you take him. How many number 1 overall picks are you going to have? Probably 1, maybe 2 out of all your 3 or 4 leagues, right? Of your redraft leagues. In best ball, you can do variations of everything. You could draft CMC 50 times if you want, and he's scratching the surface at 10% ownership and rostership in your best ball, formula. So that's not a big deal. But let's say you have 4 or 5 leagues with buddies and everything. You do 3 or 4 leagues. In one of them, not 2 of them, one of them takes CMC at 1.1. Why not? Take Bijan in 1, take Gibbs in 1, You're not gonna be able to fit everyone in if you got only 4 or 5 leagues. But I do say take Bijan or take CMC at one in one league. If I had 1.1 in 3 leagues side by side, they all began right now simultaneously. I would only take CMC in one of them. That is my advice, my standing advice, and it will remain all season long. And that is not doubting CMC as a player or his ability to drop the running back 1 overall season. It is protecting you from the almost inevitable decline that is teeter-tottering. And it's just at 28 years old, that is the drop-off year for all RBs unless you're named Derrick Henry or you didn't have consistent usage your entire career and you're like Mostert where you get handed this job and you go ahead and produce for a year, or you get handed this job and you do something crazy at 30, 31, and it's not going to be consistent though. If you've been getting work your entire career from 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, when you hit 28, your body breaks down. It's the new 30. 28 is the new 30 for RBs. It is what it is. You either understand it or you don't. You either accept it or you don't. You either go blind into the abyss every year thinking, nah, I'm not going to worry about it. 30 years old, 29, 28, doesn't matter to me. I don't look at that stuff, Smitty. Then that's on you. Ziggy, show me the front door. That's on you.
Okay.
Bijan, to me, is looking at, in my opinion, 1,800 to 2,000 total yards with ease. This puts him above 2,000 total yards. He says he's going to rush for 2,000 yards in 2024. We all kind of think that's a very lofty expectation and prediction. Why do we think that? Because he can't do it? No, that's not why. We think that because he's one of the best receiving backs in the National Football League. In fact, if you threw him into the wide receiver pool and made him a wide receiver eligible player, he would still flirt with if they used him more too, right? He would flirt with being a fantasy football wide receiver 1 if he changed positions and started catching 100 passes. Ziggy, volume 0. If he started catching 100 passes a year, 80 receptions is where he's at now. But if he catches 100 passes and he's lining up as a wide receiver, he would rival a lot of wide receivers in the National Football League. Some of his biggest highlights in the offseason, actually all of them, were receiving touchdowns. Oh, Bijan, one-handed receiving touchdown. Boom, there's a highlight. Oh, new Bijan highlight in the preseason and offseason last year as a rookie. Oh, it happened to be a receiving touchdown. This guy's a receiving marvel. And while his yardage is only 650 off 80 receptions, that's from a running back perspective. If he lined up a wide receiver, he'd get 100 receptions and have 1,400 yards receiving. You can doubt him all you want. I don't care. You could say that is total speculation and a total stupid guess. That's fine. I think of what I think about Bijan a certain way, and you might think about him a different way, and that's fine. This is the best running back, pure talent in the National Football League. All sum total, rushing, receiving, everything. The entire package, attitude, physical ability, situation, all of it together makes him the number 1 overall running back. Not saying I don't love Kyren. I still think Kyren could be the number 1 runner in the entire league between the tackles. Most touchdowns on the ground, Kyren. Most rushing yards in the league, rushing title contender, Kyren. Breece Hall, very much a combination of rushing and receiving like you see on screen for Breece Hall. Breece Hall and Bijan are kind of similar. Even though they're built a little bit different, they play similar fantasy games, right? Mix of receiving, mix of rushing. Could be a 100-yard receiver and a touchdown in any given game and have 30 or 40 yards rushing. That's the nature of Bijan and Breece Hall. And that's why Breece Hall and Bijan probably will not be 2,000 yards rushers anytime soon. They're too busy doing half of their work in the receiving department. So I love his drive. I love his goal. I love his attitude. I love his grit. Something he didn't show last year by all accounts. And I've been very honest and open about that and upfront that I sent him on a lap on one of the shows when Arthur Smith completely didn't use him near the goal line. And this guy's sitting here, and I love this about him, but I also wanted to see more grit this year, and we saw it. He said, I'm running for 2,000 yards. I'm going to be a dog this year. And we all just went,
Mashed potatoes!
that is the best thing I have ever heard. I want to be a dog is what he said. I want to be a dog, and I'm going to run for 2,000 yards. Now, again, I'm not saying he's going to do that. I'm not an idiot, but I think he's capable of doing it. He just won't need to do it. He's going to have 2,000 total yards, which is fine by me as well. No one needs it to be a certain way. Let's say he gets it via a combination. That's fine by me. The more important number probably is the 80 receptions mixed with the 15 to 20 touchdowns that I think could be more like 18 to 20 touchdowns. This guy has running back one written all over him. And I absolutely am thrilled with this quarterback situation, circling back to what is in store for the QB room. What is in store for moving the chains down the field? What is in store for Bijan with the security blanket of Cousins or Penix Jr., whoever is the backup at the time when we're talking about it? This is the most secure QB room in the entire National Football League on the one team that had the ability to be as good as anybody from a production standpoint, but had no quarterback. This was a quarterback, a headless horseman type of situation, a headless quarterback room that had so much talent, like the New York Jets last year without Aaron Rodgers, a headless quarterback room with some of the most talent from both sides of the football, and they were crippled by an inability to move the football down the field. And now you give both Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins competent backups. This guy more so than Jordan Travis in New York, but I love Jordan Travis in New York. But you give Penix Jr. this security blanket to the Atlanta Falcons, Bijan to the moon, Bijan to Saturn. Bijan's going to score 20 total touchdowns, maybe. Couldn't be more thrilled about this from so many levels, yet all you hear is negativity. All you hear is griping and moaning, complaining, and Monday morning quarterbacking, and all these fake analysts on Twitter that have no experience. Not journalists. They're not journalists. They're not even. They don't even have writing experience. They did well creating a social media page, and they wrote analyst or reporter or NFL scout on their profile. They haven't done NFL radio at all. They haven't done any scouting at all. They have no journalism degree. They haven't done content for 5-6 years, or at least written for a company that did hold that kind of content. They just say, I'm a Twitter guy. I'm a Twitter NFL guy, and you can't confirm that I am. Therefore, I am. And these people running their mouth over and over about how this situation is goofy and it's not good, and it was a waste of a pick, and the Falcons had a F grade of a draft. Give the Falcons at least a B grade. I know that you can't really give them an A with the allocation of resources, but give me this all day long. B grade, do it live, not worried about it one single bit, and this is absolutely fantastic news. This is going to be a short show today because I do have to run early. I'll be back tonight. We might draft. We might have a breaking news show. I'm sorry that this show, I wanted to go over the 5 p.m. my time, 8 p.m. Eastern time frame, but I did want to start a little bit early. This is probably the shortest show we've ever done, 33 minutes for the 8 p.m. show. I'll see you all later. Appreciate you. I'll be back tonight, though, for a third show tonight. This will be the third live stream tonight. I'll make it up to you. Let the haters hate. Penix Jr., Kirk Cousins, most secure QB room in the biz. Haters gonna hate.